Mrs. Backer stared at the lottery ticket trembling between her weathered fingers, the 6 matching numbers swimming before her tear-filled eyes. 47 years of playing the same combination, her wedding anniversary, the birthdays of her son and late husband, and the day they bought their first home, had finally paid off. $12 million. A fortune that would change everything. But the irony wasn't lost on her. This windfall had arrived precisely 1 hour after being fired from the accounting firm where she'd worked for 2 decades, downsized in favor of younger, cheaper talent. The digital clock on my dashboard read 5:42 p.m. as I sat in the senior center parking lot, trying to process the dramatic swing in my fortunes. I should have been ecstatic, planning tropical vacations and charitable donations. Instead, dread pooled in my stomach. In 30 minutes, I would have to tell my son Andrew about losing my job. We'd been living together in a suburban home for 3 years, ever since Harold's medical bills had drained my savings before cancer took him anyway. The arrangement had grown increasingly strained, with Andrew's not-so-subtle hints that at 65, I should be self-sufficient instead of occupying his guest bedroom. I tucked the lottery ticket into my worn leather wallet, behind my driver's license where it would be safe. A strange calm replaced my initial shock. I wouldn't tell Andrew about the win, not yet. First, I needed to see my only child's true character, unvarnished by knowledge of my newfound wealth. Would he support his mother through this setback, as I had supported him through countless crises? Or would the loss of my modest income contribution be the excuse he'd been waiting for? The answer came brutally fast. You what? Andrew's fork clattered against his plate, splattering spaghetti sauce across the pristine white tablecloth his wife Vanessa insisted on using despite having an active 5-year-old. They can't fire you. You've been there forever. Age discrimination is illegal, Vanessa added, though her tone lacked conviction. At 38, she was 15 years Andrew's junior and had never quite warmed to having her mother-in-law as a housemate. They called it a restructuring, I explained, twirling pasta around my fork though my appetite had vanished. Half the accounting department is gone. They kept the younger staff who'll work for entry-level salaries. Andrew ran his hands through his thinning hair, a gesture so like his father's that my heart clenched. What's your severance package? 3 months' salary. Healthcare coverage through the end of the year. That's barely anything. How are you supposed to? He stopped himself, exchanging a loaded glance with Vanessa. I set down my fork. I know this complicates things. I'll start looking for another position immediately, though at my age, it won't be easy. Mom, Andrew sighed, his expression a mixture of frustration and what looked disturbingly like resignation. We need to be realistic here. You can't stay with us indefinitely without contributing to household expenses. Andrew, Vanessa hissed, nodding meaningfully toward little Emma, who was busy building a mashed potato mountain, oblivious to the tension. It's fine, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Emma, sweetheart, would you like to go play with your new coloring books? Grandma will come see your pictures in a bit. Once Emma had skipped from the room, Andrew dropped all pretense. Mom, I've been patient. When Dad died, and you sold the house to pay his medical bills, I stepped up. But it's been 3 years. Vanessa and I need our space back. We're trying for another baby, and we need the guest room. I understand, I replied, though a cold hollowness was spreading through my chest. How much time do I have to find alternative arrangements? Andrew and Vanessa exchanged another glance, having clearly discussed this moment in private. We think the end of the month is reasonable, Vanessa said, her voice artificially gentle. That's 3 weeks to sort things out. 3 weeks. After raising this man, bandaging his skinned knees, working extra shifts to pay for his college education, sitting through countless baseball games in the rain, and nursing both him and Harold through a brutal bout of pneumonia when Andrew was 16, I had 3 weeks before my own son would put me out on the street. The lottery ticket burned in my wallet. One word for me would transform their cold calculation to fawning accommodation. But something hardened inside me at the sight of Andrew's relieved expression, as if the hardest part was now behind him. "I see," I said quietly. "3 weeks it is." That night, as I lay awake in the guest bedroom, never permitted to feel like mine, with its bland hotel-like decor and absence of personal touches, I made my decision. The $12 million would remain my secret, and I would leave as requested, disappearing from their lives with the appearance of destitution. But I wouldn't go far, and I certainly wouldn't forget. Andrew and Vanessa's comfortable life was about to meet an unexpected landlord. The Sunrise Village Senior Living Community. Andrew frowned at the brochure I'd placed on the breakfast counter. "Mom, these places are depressing. And expensive." I sipped my coffee, noting how he'd immediately focused on cost rather than quality of life. "It's what I can afford with my severance and Social Security. The location is convenient, and they have activities." "Activities," he repeated flatly. "Bingo and shuffleboard." "Among other things," I replied, keeping my tone light though my hand tightened around the mug. "I've already submitted my application. They have an opening next week." It had been 5 days since my lottery win and subsequent firing, 5 days of watching Andrew and Vanessa's poorly disguised relief as I packed my belongings into labeled boxes. Neither had offered to help me search for housing options. Neither had suggested I might stay longer if needed. The severance check they believed was my primary financial resource seemed to occupy more of their concern than my welfare. Next week. Vanessa entered the kitchen in her yoga clothes, water bottle in hand. That's perfect timing. Perfect for whom? I wondered, but smiled blandly. "Yes, it works out well for everyone." "Will you need help moving?" Andrew asked, his perfunctory offer transparent. "No, thank you. I've hired a service." Another lie. I had no intention of moving into Sunrise Village, though I'd visited the facility to maintain my cover story. My actual plans required absolute secrecy. 3 days after receiving the lottery ticket, I'd made a discreet trip to the Lottery Commission office 2 cities over, wearing a headscarf and sunglasses, precautions that had felt melodramatic until the official had mentioned publicity requirements. "Winners of amounts over $5 million must be disclosed publicly," she'd explained, sliding forms across the desk. "Your name and city of residence will be published, though we can withhold your street address." My heart had sunk. Is there any way around that requirement? "For safety reasons." She'd hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Some winners establish a trust or LLC before claiming. The entity becomes the official winner. It's perfectly legal, but you'd need an attorney to set it up quickly." That afternoon, I'd met with Jerome Blackwell, an estate attorney recommended by a former colleague. He was in his 70s, with shrewd eyes and an old-school discretion that felt trustworthy. "Protecting lottery winnings is straightforward," he'd assured me, after I'd explained my situation in careful detail, including Andrew's betrayal. "We'll establish the Backer Family Trust, with you as the sole trustee and beneficiary. The trust claims the prize and your name stays private." "And if I wanted to make certain investments through this trust?" I'd asked, thinking of Andrew's mortgage. Jerome's expression had remained professional, though something knowing had flickered in his eyes. "The trust can purchase real estate or other assets according to your instructions. All perfectly legal, all perfectly private." Now, 1 week after that meeting, I sat across from my son at his kitchen counter, pretending to consider furniture options for a senior apartment I would never occupy. I should be completely moved out by Friday, I told him, closing the brochure. "Well before your deadline." Andrew had the grace to wince at the word deadline, but his relief remained evident. "Great, that's great. I'm glad it worked out." I responded noncommittally, finishing my coffee. I should get going. I have an appointment with my financial advisor about restructuring my retirement accounts. Another fabrication. My actual appointment was with Malcolm Chin, a real estate attorney specializing in property acquisitions. Through Jerome's connections, I'd been working with Malcolm to execute the first phase of my plan. Mrs. Backer. Malcolm greeted me in his downtown office, shaking my hand firmly. At 40, he projected an efficient competence that inspired confidence. I have excellent news. The offer has been accepted. My pulse quickened. They didn't question the trust as buyer? Not at all. Cash offers from family trusts are common in this market, especially for properties in this price range. The Backer Family Trust is now in escrow to purchase Meridian Capital Investments' primary real estate holding. Meridian Capital, the property management company that owned the mortgage on Andrew and Vanessa's house, along with 30 other residential properties in the area. The company had been available for purchase at a surprisingly reasonable $8 million, well within my lottery winnings. How soon can we close? I asked, settling into the chair across from Malcolm's desk. 10 business days. Sooner, if you're willing to pay a premium to expedite. Expedite, I said immediately. I'd like ownership transferred before I'm scheduled to move out of my son's home. Malcolm nodded, making a note. We'll make it happen. Now, regarding your plan to restructure the company afterward, are you certain about keeping your involvement anonymous? As the owner, you'd have every right to introduce yourself to tenants. I'm certain, I replied firmly. The company name should change to something unrelated to me, Phoenix Property Management, perhaps. A new beginning, rising from ashes. The symbolism pleased me. Existing staff can remain if they're willing to sign confidentiality agreements regarding ownership. Day-to-day operations should continue normally, except for the specific changes we'll implement for my son's property. Malcolm studied me thoughtfully. You understand that once the transfer is complete, you'll have full legal authority over all these properties, including your son's home. You could evict him if you chose. I'm aware, I said, meeting his gaze steadily. But that's not my intention. Not immediately, at least. My plan required more subtlety, more education than a simple eviction would provide. Andrew needed to understand the precariousness of security, the cold reality of depending on others' goodwill, just as I had learned from him. As I left Malcolm's office, I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from Andrew and a text. Mom, great news. Found someone interested in buying your car. Older model but decent shape. Could help with your moving expenses. Let me know if interested. My 7-year-old Toyota, paid off and reliable, was apparently next on their list of things to liquidate from my life. The presumption was breathtaking. Rather than responding immediately, I slipped the phone back into my purse and continued walking, the spring sunshine doing little to warm the chill that had settled in my chest. By Friday morning, for large boxes and 2 suitcases, my life reduced to its portable essentials, sat neatly stacked by Andrew's front door. The rest had been moved to a storage unit Andrew didn't know existed, paid for with cash from a small withdrawal that wouldn't raise eyebrows on my bank statement. Absolutely not, I said firmly, when Andrew again brought up selling my car over our final breakfast together. I need reliable transportation. The senior places shuttles, he countered. And the money would help with your expenses. We found a buyer willing to pay $7,000. The we was telling. He and Vanessa had clearly been discussing my financial situation extensively, without including me in those conversations. I appreciate your concern, I replied, keeping my tone even. But the Toyota stays with me. Andrew sighed dramatically. Mom, you need to be practical. Your income has drastically changed. I'm well aware of my financial situation, I said, rising from the table. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to finish loading my car. The moving service is only handling the boxes. I can help with the suitcases, he offered, belatedly remembering basic courtesy. Thank you, but I've got it. I wasn't sure I could bear his touch right now, even in assistance. An hour later, with my belongings tetrased into the Toyota's trunk and back seat, I stood in Andrew's driveway for our awkward farewell. Vanessa had conveniently remembered a hair appointment, leaving just Andrew and Emma to see me off. "Call when you're settled," Andrew said, hands shoved in his pockets. "We'll come visit once you're unpacked." "Grandma, do you have to go?" Emma's small face crumpled, her arms wrapped tightly around my waist. "I don't want you to leave." My heart twisted. Emma was the one genuine regret in my plan. "I have to go to my new home, sweetheart. But I'll see you soon, I promise." "You won't forget me?" Her voice wobbled. "Never," I assured her, kneeling to meet her eyes. "Grandmas don't forget their precious girls, not ever." I hugged her fiercely, breathing in the strawberry scent of her shampoo, then gently disentangled her arms and stood to face my son. "Well," I said, suddenly at a loss. How did one say goodbye to a child who had just demonstrated that decades of love and sacrifice meant nothing when inconvenient? Andrew stepped forward, giving me a quick, perfunctory hug. "Drive safely. Let us know you arrived okay." "I will." I got into my car without looking back, adjusted my mirrors, and pulled away from the house where I'd spent the last 3 years feeling increasingly unwelcome. But unlike what Andrew believed, I wasn't driving toward a downsized life in a retirement community. I was driving toward the luxury extended stay hotel where I'd booked a 2-bedroom suite for the next month, plenty of time to close on Meridian Capital and establish myself in the spacious downtown condo I'd already purchased through the trust. As I reached the end of the street, I glanced in my rearview mirror. Andrew had already gone inside, but little Emma stood forlornly in the driveway, still waving. I blinked back tears and waved once more before turning the corner. Some bonds remained unbroken, but the one between mother and son had been severed by his own hand, and my newly purchased ownership of his mortgage was about to make that painfully clear to him. The transformation of Meridian Capital Investment to Phoenix Property Management took precisely 16 days, a remarkably swift transition made possible by the efficiency of motivated attorneys and the persuasive power of money. On day 17, I sat in Malcolm Chen's office reviewing the final documentation. "Congratulations, Mrs. Backer," Malcolm said, sliding the folder across his desk. "You are now the official owner of 31 residential properties, including your son's home." I opened the folder, examining the deed transfers and corporate restructuring documents. Everything appeared in order, with my name carefully obscured behind the Backer Family Trust and its relationship to Phoenix Property Management. "What happens next?" I asked, closing the folder. "That's entirely up to you," Malcolm replied. "The staff has been retained under new management contracts with confidentiality provisions, as you requested. They've been instructed to continue normal operations with all properties except number 1742 Oakwood Drive. Andrew's address. The mortgage on his 4-bedroom Colonial represented one of Meridian's larger residential loans, with 23 years of payments remaining. And the special instructions for that property? Malcolm consulted his notes. The occupants will receive notification tomorrow that their mortgage has been transferred to Phoenix Property Management under new ownership. Terms have been reviewed and adjusted according to previously undisclosed clauses in the original agreement. Will they understand what that means? I asked. The letter explains that their interest rate will increase by 2 percentage points effective immediately, as permitted under Section 12B of their mortgage agreement, a clause most homeowners never read carefully. Their monthly payment will increase by approximately $640. A substantial but not catastrophic increase, enough to create strain without immediate crisis. The first turn of the screw. Additionally, Malcolm continued, the property is now subject to quarterly inspections and stricter enforcement of all HOA guidelines. The first inspection is scheduled for next Tuesday. I nodded, satisfaction mingling with a distant ache. This was not who I had ever expected to become, a calculating orchestrator of my own son's distress. But Andrew's casual discarding of me had revealed an ugly truth. The unconditional love I'd given him for 43 years flowed in only one direction. "Is there anything else you need from me today?" I asked, gathering my purse. Malcolm hesitated. "Mrs. Backer, as your attorney, I'm obligated to ensure you understand the potential consequences of these actions. Once implemented, these changes may irreparably damage your relationship with your son." The relationship was damaged when he gave me 3 weeks to vacate his home after losing my job, I replied evenly. "I'm simply ensuring he understands what that feels like." Malcolm nodded, accepting my decision. "Very well. We've established the secure email account you requested. All correspondence regarding Phoenix properties will be directed there, with critical matters flagged for your immediate attention." I left the office with my property portfolio securely documented and my revenge set in motion. The next phase of my plan required patience, watching from a distance as Andrew and Vanessa discovered their changing circumstances. I didn't have to wait long. The following evening, my secure email pinged with an urgent message forwarded from Phoenix Properties Customer Service Department. Call received from Andrew Backer regarding mortgage rate increase. Caller extremely agitated, demanding explanation and reversal of adjustment. Informed caller that changes were contractually permitted under original agreement. Caller requested direct contact with management. As per protocol for property number 1742, referred caller to written correspondence channels only. Call duration, 17 minutes. I smiled grimly at my laptop screen. Andrew's financial situation was comfortable but not extravagant. His job as a regional sales manager provided a good salary, and Vanessa's part-time work as a real estate stager added supplementary income. But their lifestyle consumed most of their earnings. The luxury SUV in the driveway, Vanessa's designer wardrobe, Emma's private preschool, and the country club membership Andrew considered essential for networking. An unexpected $640 monthly increase would force uncomfortable decisions. Exactly as I intended. 2 days later, another forwarded message appeared. Written complaint received from Andrew Backer, property number 1742. Occupant contests interest rate adjustment as predatory and potentially illegal. Requests immediate meeting with ownership. Standard response issued reiterating contractual terms and declining in-person meeting. Legal has confirmed all actions fall within regulatory compliance. I could almost see Andrew's frustration, his sense of impotent outrage at encountering an implacable system that didn't respond to his demands. How familiar that feeling had become to me in recent years, as my own son grew increasingly dismissive of my needs and concerns. The quarterly inspection that followed further escalated tensions. Phoenix Properties sent their most meticulous inspector, armed with a comprehensive checklist and instructions to note every minor violation, from the slightly overgrown hedge along the west property line to the unauthorized satellite dish installation, the peeling paint on the garden shed, and the non-regulation mailbox Andrew had installed last summer. The resulting compliance letter, requiring corrections within 30 days to avoid fines, provoked another heated call to Phoenix's customer service department. Caller Andrew Backer became verbally abusive regarding property inspection results. Demanded to know why previous management had never enforced these guidelines. Informed caller that new ownership was implementing stricter compliance protocols for all properties. Caller stated intent to consult attorney. Call ended abruptly by caller. I read these reports from the comfort of my new downtown condo, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. The irony wasn't lost on me that my living situation had dramatically improved since being forced from Andrew's home, while his own housing security was increasingly precarious. After 2 weeks of observing from a distance, I decided it was time to witness the effects of my actions firsthand. I scheduled lunch with my former neighbor Irene, who lived 3 doors down from Andrew and had been my regular walking companion during my years in his home. Margaret. Irene greeted me warmly at the cafe we'd chosen. You look wonderful. How's the senior living place treating you? I smoothly navigated this fiction I'd created. It's an adjustment, but I'm settling in. How are things in the neighborhood? Irene's expression shifted to concern. Actually, I'm worried about Andrew and Vanessa. There seems to be trouble with their mortgage company. Andrew was just ranting about it at the neighborhood barbecue last weekend. Oh. I kept my tone casual. What kind of trouble? Some corporate takeover of their mortgage holder. Apparently, the new company is raising rates and enforcing all sorts of regulations. Andrew said they're being targeted specifically, though I can't imagine why. Irene stirred her coffee thoughtfully. They're even talking about having to sell if things continue this way. Selling. That was faster than I'd anticipated. The financial pressure must be more significant than I'd calculated. That seems extreme, I remarked. Surely they can manage a rate increase. Irene leaned closer. Between us, I don't think they were as financially stable as they appeared. Vanessa mentioned having to pull Emma from dance classes, and Andrew's golf membership is on hold. There's been tension between them. Raised voices after dark, that sort of thing. The conversation continued, with Irene providing unwitting intelligence about my son's deteriorating situation. By the time we parted with promises to meet again soon, I had a clear picture. Andrew and Vanessa's comfortable life was crumbling under the pressure I'd orchestrated, their marriage strained by financial stress they'd never anticipated. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, a complicated mixture of satisfaction and sorrow followed me home. The mother in me ached for my child's distress, even as the wounded, discarded woman in me felt vindicated. But I had committed to this course. Andrew had shown me who he truly was when tested. Now he would learn the same about me. The next escalation came the following week, when Phoenix Properties issued a formal notice regarding the property's water drainage issues, problems that had existed since Andrew purchased the home but had been deemed minor by previous inspectors. The letter required professional assessment and likely extensive landscaping modifications, with estimated costs between $5,000 and $8,000. Andrew's response was predictably furious, this time in the form of a letter from his attorney challenging the inspection findings. Phoenix's legal team, now ultimately reporting to me, responded with a detailed defense of their requirements, citing county regulations and engineering assessments that left no room for dispute. This exchange coincided with my first direct contact with Andrew since leaving his home over a month earlier. His text message arrived on a Sunday evening. Mom, need advice. Having serious issues with mortgage company. May need to sell house. Can we meet for coffee tomorrow? I stared at my phone, conflicting emotions surging. This was the first time Andrew had reached out for any purpose beyond perfunctory birthday wishes for my 65th birthday 2 weeks earlier. The request for advice, financial advice, from the mother he discarded for being financially burdensome, contained an irony that might have been amusing under different circumstances. After careful consideration, I replied, "Sorry to hear that. I'm available at 10 a.m. at Riverside Cafe." The meeting would be a test of my resolve, my ability to maintain the fiction of my diminished circumstances while gathering intelligence on the effectiveness of my strategy. It would also be the first time I'd seen my son since implementing my plan. The prospect left me both eager and apprehensive. The Riverside Cafe sat 15 floors below my condo, a convenience I'd considered when suggesting the location. I arrived early, selecting a table with a view of the entrance while remaining partially screened by a decorative plan arrangement. At precisely 10:03, Andrew hurried in, looking harried and slightly disheveled, so unlike his usual polished appearance that I momentarily questioned whether I'd gone too far. "Mom," he said, spotting me and rushing over. He gave me a quick, distracted hug before dropping into the chair opposite mine. Thanks for meeting me. You look different. I had deliberately selected my outfit for this encounter. A new, subtly expensive cashmere sweater in a flattering sage green, tailored slacks, and a simple gold necklace Harold had given me on our 30th anniversary. Nothing flashy enough to raise questions, but a definite elevation from the bargain store basics I'd worn in his home. Senior living agrees with me, I said mildly. How are you, Andrew? You seem stressed. He ran a hand through his hair, thinner than when I'd last seen him, with new strands of gray at the temples. It's been a nightmare, Mom. This new company that bought our mortgage, Phoenix Properties, they're targeting us specifically, I'm sure of it. Targeting you? Why would they do that? I don't know. His voice rose, drawing glances from nearby tables. He lowered it with visible effort. But they've increased our rate, cited us for violations no one ever cared about before, and now they're demanding expensive drainage work. It's like they're trying to force us out. I sipped my tea, watching him over the rim. That sounds very challenging. What does your attorney say? That everything they're doing is technically legal. It's all buried in the fine print of agreements we signed years ago. Andrew's frustration was palpable. We're bleeding money, Mom. The increased payment alone is stretching us thin, and now these other costs. Have you considered downsizing? I asked, echoing his pragmatic advice to me weeks earlier. Perhaps a smaller home would be more manageable. The suggestion visibly rankled him. We shouldn't have to move. This is our home. Emma's school district. Our neighborhood. I nodded sympathetically while thinking of my own abrupt dislocation from that same home. Sometimes circumstances force difficult changes. I understand how disruptive that can be. A flicker of shame crossed his features, the first acknowledgement, however brief, that he might now be experiencing something similar to what he'd inflicted on me. I thought maybe you could help, he said, his tone shifting to one I recognized from childhood, the voice he'd used when asking for extra allowance or permission to attend a questionable party. You've always been good with financial matters. Maybe you could look at our paperwork, see if there's something we're missing. I'd be happy to review your documents, I agreed. Though I'm not sure what insight I could offer that your attorney hasn't already provided. Thanks, Mom. Relief softened his expression. I knew I could count on you. Could he? The question lingered as our conversation turned to safer topics. Emma's progress in kindergarten, Vanessa's struggling staging business, the neighborhood gossip Irene had already shared with me. Andrew carefully avoided asking about my new living situation beyond superficial inquiries easily deflected. As we prepared to leave, he hesitated. Mom, I've been thinking. If things get worse with the house, we might need to make some changes. Vanessa's parents have offered to help with a down payment on a smaller place. Interesting. Vanessa's wealthy parents entering the picture was an unexpected development. That's generous of them. Yeah, but there's a catch. They want us to move closer to them. In Florida. Florida. Over 1,000 miles away. The distance would effectively sever whatever fragile connection remained between us, and between me and Emma. I see, I said carefully. That would be quite a change. It's just an option we're considering, he backpedaled, perhaps noting my expression. A last resort. We parted with promises to meet again soon, Andrew clutching a notebook with the financial questions I'd agreed to research. As he walked away, shoulders hunched against problems he couldn't understand, I felt an unexpected ripple of doubt. Was I pushing too hard? Creating consequences I hadn't fully anticipated? But then I remembered the cold efficiency with which he'd ejected me from his life after my job loss. The casual assumption that I was disposable once no longer financially useful. The complete absence of the loyalty and protection I'd always shown him. No, I decided, returning to my condo with renewed determination. The lesson wasn't complete yet. Andrew needed to understand exactly what it meant to have security stripped away by someone you trusted. To feel the ground shifting beneath your feet, your future suddenly uncertain. The next phase of my plan would ensure that education continued. The quarterly financial review meeting of Phoenix Property Management took place in a sleek conference room overlooking the city skyline. As the trust owner, I attended under the guise of Ms. Baker, a representative of the investment group, wearing a stylish gray wig and glasses that subtly altered my appearance, sufficient disguise for someone Andrew had never looked at closely enough to truly see. Property 1742 continues to be problematic, reported Dennis Morrison, the property manager handling Andrew's case. The owners have completed some of the required maintenance, but are disputing the drainage requirements. They've also missed the most recent payment deadline. By how many days? I asked, reviewing the file open before me. 5 days, Ms. Baker. It's their first delinquency since the ownership change. I nodded thoughtfully. Send the standard late notice, with fees. If payment isn't received within 10 days, proceed with the preliminary default warning. That seems rather aggressive for a first-time late payment, observed Carol Winters, the company's longtime office manager. The previous ownership typically granted more flexibility. Phoenix operates differently, I replied firmly. Consistent enforcement builds better compliance. No exceptions. The meeting continued, reviewing the entire portfolio, but my thoughts remained fixed on property number 1742. The missed payment confirmed what Andrew's demeanor had suggested during our coffee meeting. His financial situation was deteriorating rapidly under the combined pressures I'd orchestrated. Following the meeting, I met privately with Malcolm Chin to discuss next steps. The trust has now owned Phoenix for nearly 2 months, Malcolm noted. Your son's property has experienced significant compliance enforcement and a rate increase. The financial pressure is clearly having an effect. What's your ultimate objective here, Mrs. Baker? A fair question, and one I'd been asking myself with increasing frequency. I want Andrew to understand vulnerability, I replied after a moment's reflection. To experience the uncertainty I felt when he discarded me. To recognize what it means to have someone control your housing security. And when that understanding is achieved, what then? Then, I hesitated, the endgame still somewhat nebulous in my mind. Then the property transfers to my direct ownership. Andrew becomes my tenant if he chooses to stay. The power dynamic becomes explicit rather than hidden. Malcolm made a note. We can prepare for that transition whenever you decide the time is right. The trust structure allows for individual properties to be extracted and transferred to you personally. I nodded, a plan crystallizing. Prepare the paperwork. I'll determine the timing based on developments over the next few weeks. Those developments accelerated faster than anticipated. The following Tuesday, my secure Phoenix email contained an urgent message. Andrew Baker called regarding property number 1742. Payment now 15 days late. Caller requested payment arrangement, citing temporary financial hardship. Following protocol for this property, informed caller that written request must be submitted for consideration. Caller became extremely distressed, stated family may become homeless if flexibility not granted. Homeless. The word sent a cold shock through me. Had I pushed too far, too fast? The goal was to create insecurity and awareness, not actual destitution. I immediately called Dennis Morrison. What's the actual risk of foreclosure on the Baker property? I asked when he answered. Minimal at this stage, Dennis assured me. They're only 15 days late on one payment. Standard procedure wouldn't initiate foreclosure proceedings until they're at least 90 days delinquent. The language in our notices is deliberately severe to encourage prompt payment. And have they submitted the written hardship request? Just came in by email an hour ago. Rather desperate in tone. Mr. Backer claims a temporary cash flow issue due to commission payment delays and unexpected medical expenses. Requests 30-day extension without late fees. Medical expenses. That was new information. What kind of medical expenses? Doesn't specify in the request. Would you like me to inquire? No, I said quickly. That won't be necessary. Approve the extension, but maintain the late fees. And Dennis? Schedule the next property inspection for immediately after the extension period ends. Yes, Ms. Baker. Anything else? I hesitated, then added, keep me closely informed of all communications regarding this property. Flag anything concerning immediate habitability or safety issues. After ending the call, I sat in my living room watching the river flow below my windows, questioning my course. The mother in me wanted to end the charade immediately, to reveal my lottery winnings and financially rescue my son from distress. But the wounded, discarded woman, the one who had been deemed expendable after decades of sacrifice, held firm. The lesson wasn't complete. Andrew's temporary panic over one late mortgage payment couldn't compare to the existential uncertainty I'd faced when he'd given me 3 weeks to vacate my home after losing my job. He needed to understand that vulnerability more deeply before revelation could lead to genuine insight. I decided to gather more information directly. Texting Andrew, I suggested dinner that weekend to discuss your financial questions. His eager acceptance confirmed his continuing distress. We met at a modestly priced restaurant near his home, his choice, another indication of financial strain. Andrew arrived alone, explaining that Vanessa was home with Emma, who had another ear infection. Another? I asked, concern for my granddaughter momentarily overriding all other considerations. How many has she had? Andrew sighed, looking older than his 43 years. 3 in the past 2 months. The specialist says she might need tubes, but our insurance deductible is $5,000. So, these were the medical expenses. My granddaughter's health, not some elective procedure or cosmetic enhancement as I'd half suspected. Is she in pain? I asked, maternal worry resurfacing. She's on antibiotics again. They help, but she's miserable. Andrew ran a hand through his hair, the familiar gesture now seeming less like Harold and more like a man at the end of his rope. It's been rough, Mom. Everything happening at once. Our conversation over dinner revealed the full extent of Andrew's predicament. The Phoenix-imposed mortgage increase had coincided with his company restructuring sales territories, delaying commission payments by at least 6 weeks. Vanessa had taken on extra staging jobs to compensate, leaving Emma in expensive after-school care that further strained their budget. Then the ear infections had started, adding medical bills to their mounting expenses. We've cut everything we can, Andrew explained, his dinner barely touched. Country club membership, gym, cable TV. Vanessa's selling designer clothes online. But with the mortgage situation, he trailed off, staring into his water glass. What about the drainage work Phoenix demanded? I asked, knowing the answer but needing to hear it from him. Can't afford it. Not remotely. And now they've scheduled another inspection right after our payment extension ends. His laugh was hollow. It's like they're deliberately setting us up to fail. Shame flickered through me. They were, of course, because I had instructed them to do exactly that. Have you considered accepting your in-laws' offer? I suggested. Florida might be a fresh start. Andrew looked up, surprise evident. You'd be okay with us moving that far away? After everything with Dad and now? He gestured vaguely, encompassing my supposed situation. I want what's best for you and Emma, I said, the statement both truthful and evasive. If Florida provides security, that's important. Mom, Andrew's voice dropped, embarrassment coloring his features. I know it's a lot to ask, especially after asking you to move out. But do you have any savings that could help us through this? just as a loan until my commissions come through.
We can't lose the house, Mom.
It would devastate Emma. The request hung between us, evidence that Andrew still hadn't fully grasped the lesson I was teaching. Even now, facing his own housing insecurity, he saw me primarily as a potential resource rather than a person who had faced identical fears because of his actions. I wish I could help, I replied, my tone deliberately reminiscent of his when he'd informed me I couldn't stay with them indefinitely. But my situation is quite constrained these days. The senior living facility takes most of my income. His face fell. I understand. It was worth asking. We finished dinner with strained conversation about safer topics, Andrew repeatedly checking his phone for texts from Vanessa about Emma's condition. As we parted in the parking lot, he hugged me, a real embrace this time, not the perfunctory gesture from our previous parting. Thanks for listening, Mom. It helps just to talk about it. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak as contradictory emotions battled within me. The drive back to my condo was a blur of conflicted thoughts. Emma's ear infections complicated matters significantly. My plan had never included causing distress to my granddaughter, even indirectly. Yet revealing myself now, before Andrew had fully understood the vulnerability I'd experienced, would undermine the purpose of everything I'd orchestrated. The solution came to me as I parked in my building's underground garage. I would accelerate the timeline, bringing the lesson to its conclusion before Emma's health could be further compromised. It was time for Andrew to learn exactly who controlled his housing destiny. The next morning, I called Malcolm Chun and set the final phase in motion. I'd like to proceed with the property transfer immediately, I instructed. And then I want to schedule a meeting with my son at Phoenix's offices. A direct confrontation? Malcolm sounded concerned. Are you certain that's wise? It's necessary, I replied firmly. Prepare the paperwork and arrange the meeting for Thursday afternoon. Tell him Phoenix's ownership wants to discuss his situation personally. By Thursday morning, property number 1742, Andrew and Vanessa's home, had been legally transferred from Phoenix Property Management to me personally, the deed recorded with the county under my name. The trail was now clear for anyone who looked. Margaret Backer owned her son's home outright. I dressed carefully for the meeting, selecting a tailored blue suit I'd purchased after receiving my lottery winnings, professional, expensive, and nothing Andrew had ever seen me wear. No disguise this time. No obscured identity. Just the mother he'd discarded, now revealed as the architect of his recent misfortunes. The Phoenix offices occupied the 12th floor of a downtown high-rise, all glass and polished surfaces projecting corporate efficiency. I arrived 30 minutes before the scheduled meeting, settling into the conference room to review my approach one final time with Malcolm. The paperwork is in order, he confirmed, sliding a folder across the table. The property is now solely in your name. You have complete legal authority over its disposition. And the mortgage? Technically, you now hold the note. You can modify terms, forgive the debt entirely, or maintain the current arrangement, whatever you decide. I nodded, a strange calm settling over me. Thank you, Malcolm. I'd like a few minutes alone before my son arrives. Left in solitude, I opened the folder and traced my fingers over the deed bearing my name. Such a simple document to represent such complex emotions. The property's legal description, lot size, boundaries, zoning classification, reduced a family's home to impersonal measurements and plat numbers. Just as Andrew had reduced our relationship to a financial calculation when it became inconvenient. My phone buzzed with a text from the receptionist. Andrew had arrived. Early, which indicated his anxiety. I closed the folder and took a deep breath, preparing for a confrontation 3 months in the making. When the conference room door opened, Andrew entered with the wary posture of someone approaching a firing squad. He wore a suit, his sales presentation attire, but it hung slightly loose, suggesting recent weight loss. Behind him came Dennis Morrison, Phoenix's property manager, who had no idea of my true identity but had been instructed to attend this meeting. "Mr. Backer, please have a seat." Malcolm gestured to the chair directly across from me. "I'm Malcolm Chun, legal counsel for Phoenix Property Management. You've already met Mr. Morrison. And this is..." "Mom." Andrew froze halfway into his chair, confusion etched across his features. "What are you doing here?" "Hello, Andrew," I said calmly. "Please sit down. We have much to discuss." He sank into the chair, gaze darting between me, Malcolm, and Dennis. "I don't understand. Is this about a loan? Did you arrange something with them?" "In a manner of speaking." I opened the folder and removed the deed, sliding it across the table. "I'd like you to review this document carefully." Andrew took the paper with hesitant hands, scanning its contents. I watched his expression transform as comprehension dawned, confusion giving way to disbelief, then shock as he reached the ownership line bearing my name. "This can't be right," he whispered, looking up at me with wide eyes. "This says you own our house." "That's not possible." "It's entirely accurate," Malcolm confirmed. "Mrs. Backer is the legal owner of the property at 1742 Oakwood Drive as of 9 a.m. yesterday." "But how? Why?" Andrew's voice rose with each question. "Mom, what is this?" "3 months ago," I began, holding his gaze steadily, "I lost my job of 20 years and you gave me 3 weeks to vacate your home. The same day I was fired, I won $12 million in the lottery." His face drained of color.
What?
"I decided not to tell you about my winnings. I wanted to see how you would treat your mother when you believed she had nothing to offer you." The answer was illuminating. Andrew's mouth opened and closed without producing sound, the implications crashing over him in visible waves. "After establishing the Backer Family Trust to claim my lottery winnings anonymously, I purchased Meridian Capital, the company that held your mortgage, and renamed it Phoenix Property Management. Every rate increase, every inspection, every demand for repairs came from me, Andrew. From the mother you discarded when she became financially inconvenient." "That's not what happened," he protested weakly. "We needed the space. For another baby." "A pregnancy that never materialized," I interrupted. "A convenient excuse to remove the burden I had become." "Tell me, did you even consider alternatives? Helping me find affordable housing nearby? Converting your home office? Anything that would have kept me close to my family during a crisis?" His silence was answer enough. "I created Phoenix to teach you what vulnerability feels like," I continued. "To help you understand the fear and uncertainty I experienced when my own child treated me as disposable. Every financial pressure you've felt these past months has been carefully calibrated to replicate what you inflicted on me." Andrew stared at the deed, then back at me, his expression a battlefield of emotions: shock, betrayal, anger, and dawning comprehension. "So all of this, the rate increase, the inspections, the drainage demands, it was all revenge." His voice hardened. "Do you know what you've put us through? The stress? Emma's been sick, Mom." "I'm aware of Emma's ear infections," I replied. "Why do you think I accelerated my timeline? I never intended to cause my granddaughter distress. This was between you and me." Dennis Morrison shifted uncomfortably in his chair, clearly struggling to process the personal drama unfolding in what he'd expected to be a standard business meeting. Malcolm, more prepared, maintained his professional composure. "What happens now?" Andrew finally asked, defeat evident in his slumped shoulders. "Are you evicting us? Taking your revenge to its conclusion?" "That depends entirely on you," I said, leaning forward. "I own your home outright. I can maintain the current terms, making your life increasingly difficult until you're forced to leave. I can evict you immediately, or I can create new terms that better reflect a balanced relationship between us." "What does that mean, balanced?" It means recognizing that relationships can't be reduced to financial convenience, that family connections carry obligations beyond what's immediately beneficial. I removed another document from the folder. This is a new agreement. It transfers the property to a trust benefiting Emma, with you and Vanessa as lifetime tenants under specific conditions. His eyes narrowed with suspicion as he took the document. What conditions? Regular family involvement, weekly dinners, school events, holidays, a grandmother's appropriate place in her granddaughter's life. I paused. And a son's acknowledgement of his mother's value beyond her economic utility. Andrew scanned the document, his expression cycling through multiple emotions before settling into something like shame. You did all this to teach me a lesson. I did all this because you showed me who you truly are when tested. Now you know who I am as well. A millionaire who secretly tormented her own son. Bitterness edged his words. A mother who sacrificed for a child who discarded her without hesitation, I countered, who then ensured that child understood exactly how that felt. Silence stretched between us, decades of complex emotions distilled into this moment of naked truth. Finally, Andrew set down the agreement. What about Emma's medical bills? Was making it harder for us to pay for her treatments part of your lesson too? The question struck its intended target. I didn't know about her ear infections until our dinner. That's why I moved forward with this meeting, to end the financial pressure before it affected her care. But you're willing to use access to her as leverage now, he noted, tapping the agreement. I'm establishing boundaries that should have existed all along. There's a difference. Andrew ran his hands over his face, momentarily concealing his expression. When he looked up, something had shifted in his eyes, a recognition I hadn't seen there before. You know what the worst part is? He said quietly. I keep thinking about what Dad would say if he knew what I did. How disappointed he'd be. For the first time in our confrontation, genuine pain lanced through me. Harold would indeed have been devastated by Andrew's behavior, and perhaps by my response as well. Your father believed in treating people with dignity, I acknowledged. Especially family. I didn't do that with you. The admission seemed to cost him physically, the words dragged from some resistant place. When you lost your job, I saw only the inconvenience. Not everything you'd done for me. Everything you gave up. It wasn't quite an apology, but it contained the seeds of understanding I'd been trying to cultivate. The first glimmer of awareness that might, eventually lead to genuine insight. Take the agreement home, I said, my voice softening slightly. Discuss it with Vanessa. You have until Monday to decide whether you can accept those terms. And, if we can't, then you'll need to find new housing arrangements. I hear Florida is nice tea. Grandma, can you help me with this part? Emma's voice carried from the craft table I'd set up in my condo sunroom, now permanently equipped with child-sized furniture and art supplies for our weekend visits. Of course, sweetheart. I set aside my coffee and joined my granddaughter, examining her project, a family tree assignment for school. She'd chosen an actual tree design, with family members' photos attached to paper leaves sprouting from construction paper branches. I need to put great-grandpa and great-grandma on Dad's side, but I don't have their pictures, she explained, pointing to empty leaves near the top of her creation. I think I can help with that. I retrieved a photo album from my bookshelf, one of many I'd reclaimed from storage after the confrontation with Andrew. Here they are on their wedding day. Emma studied the black and white photograph with fascination. Great-grandpa looks like Daddy. He certainly does, I agreed, helping her carefully cut out the image. Your father has a smile. As we worked, I glanced through the open doorway to my kitchen, where Andrew was preparing lunch, a routine we'd established over the past year. Sundays at my condo, Wednesdays at their house, where the promised in-law suite now stood fully constructed, though not yet occupied. The journey from confrontation to cautious reconciliation had been neither smooth nor complete. Trust rebuilt in small increments, through Andrew's consistent follow-through on our agreement, through difficult conversations about past hurts and future expectations, through his genuine efforts to make amends rather than simply secure financial advantage. The most significant step had come 6 months after our confrontation, when Andrew had voluntarily suggested revising the trust agreement to include stronger provisions for my long-term care, should it ever become necessary. I want it in writing, he insisted. A legal obligation that can't be conveniently forgotten or set aside. You shouldn't have to secretly win the lottery to ensure you're treated properly in your old age. The amendment, drafted by Malcolm and signed without hesitation, had represented something beyond mere legal protection. It was Andrew's acknowledgement that his previous behavior had been fundamentally wrong, not merely inconvenient in its consequences. Our relationship remained a work in progress, the wounds inflicted on both sides slowly healing, but still tender when pressed. Vanessa, pragmatic as ever, had adapted to the new family dynamic with surprising grace, treating my financial interventions as water under the bridge once Emma's medical needs were fully addressed. Emma herself had thrived, her ear infections resolved after the tube procedure, her joy at having her grandmother regularly present unmarred by any awareness of the adult complexities surrounding our arrangement. To her, the past year had simply brought more grandma time, more pancake Sundays, more stability rather than less. "Lunch is ready," Andrew called from the kitchen. "Emma, go wash your hands, please." As my granddaughter scampered off, Andrew joined me by the craft table, glancing down at the family tree with its interwoven branches and carefully placed photographs. "That turned out well," he observed, "though she's missing a few relatives on the extended branches." "Family trees are always works in progress," I replied, the metaphor not lost on either of us. Branches extend, connections strengthen or weaken, new growth emerges. Andrew nodded, a familiar thoughtfulness in his expression. "Mom, I've been meaning to ask, have you given any more thought to the in-law suite? It's been ready for 2 months now." The question didn't surprise me. It had become a gentle refrain in recent weeks. The suite was indeed complete, beautifully designed with both independence and inclusion in mind. A symbolic counterpoint to the guest room that had never truly been mine. "I'm considering it," I said honestly, "but I'm not ready to give up my river view just yet." What didn't need saying, was that maintaining my separate residence represented more than aesthetic preference. It was a concrete reminder to us both that my presence in their lives was now a choice freely made, not a dependency to be managed. That I could walk away at any time, my security intact, my future assured. The lottery winnings that had made my revenge possible had also granted me something more valuable than mere wealth: the power to define my own place in the family constellation, to establish boundaries that couldn't be casually overridden by others' convenience. "The offer remains open," Andrew said, his tone carefully free of pressure. "Whenever you're ready. If you're ready." "I know." I squeezed his arm lightly. "Let's see where we are at Christmas. That seems like a natural transition point if I decide to make the move." Emma returned, her damp hands testament to thorough washing, and we moved to the dining table for lunch. As we ate, she chattered about school and friends, Andrew and I contributing to the conversation with the practiced rhythm of our new normal. Looking at them, my son who had betrayed me and then begun the hard work of atonement, my granddaughter who had never wavered in her simple love, I felt the complex satisfaction of a lesson painfully but effectively taught. The house on Oakwood Drive remained mine legally, but its true ownership had shifted to something less tangible and more meaningful, a shared understanding that family bonds carried obligations beyond convenience, that security could never be taken for granted, that actions spawned consequences that could transform lives in unexpected ways. Would I eventually move into the in-law suite? Perhaps. The gesture of creating it, of Andrew literally making space in his home and life, where before he had ejected me, carried symbolic weight that didn't require immediate occupation to be meaningful. For now, my condo with its river view and financial independence served as both refuge and reminder. A reminder to Andrew of the mother he had underestimated. A reminder to me of the woman I had discovered in the aftermath of betrayal, someone stronger, more strategic, and more formidable than either of us had previously recognized. More lemonade, Grandma? Emma offered, pitcher poised. Yes, please, sweetheart. I held out my glass, watching her pour with careful concentration, her father observing with the same attentive gaze. Just the right amount. Thank you. Some lessons required lottery winnings and property deeds to teach effectively. Others, like the simple joy of Sunday lunch with family who now understood your true value, were beyond price. Did you enjoy this story? Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more riveting stories of justice, family drama, and sweet revenge. Each day, we bring you compelling tales of ordinary people taking extraordinary action when pushed too far. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What would you have done in Mrs. Backer's shoes? Join our growing community of storytelling fans who know that sometimes the most satisfying endings are the ones where justice is served with a side of life-changing lessons.